Nicola Rossi. I'm head of business development at Tutored, and I'm pleased to host the second briefing webinar of the Challenge startup launched by the Entrepreneurship Club of Politecnico di Milano. Today we have several distinguished speakers, and with me to conduct this event we have Davide Cianni and Lorenzo Bottaccini from the Entrepreneurship Club, who will materially host this event. Just a few indications before we really get going. So if during the webinar you want to leave a comment, you can see on the orange toolbar on the left side of your screen, there is the icon of, there's a cloud shape icon with two lines inside, and that's a sort of chat room. So you can leave any comment in that section. If on the other hand, you would like to drop a question, you can see there is a section immediately below with a question mark inside, and that's the question and answer section. And at the end of each presentation, we will address all your concerns, doubts, and curiosities, and we refer all the questions to the relevant speakers. So I leave the floor to Lorenzo and Davide, and enjoy your webinar.
Thank you very much, Nicola, and many thanks to the whole Tutored organization for helping us in this Startup e-Challenge and hosting us on this magnific platform. My name is Lorenzo Bottaccini, and I am from the Entrepreneurship Club PoliMi, as well as Davide, which is a colleague of mine. Today, the goal of today's event is to better focus on what are the requests that we make for the challenge. So what are the topics that we're addressing, and what are the hot topics at the same time in the nowadays industry. I am very happy to have together with me three amazing speakers for today's event. Each one of them is going to take care of one of the sustainable development goals that are at the core of our challenge. I'm happy to welcome Professor Francesco Grimaccia, Associate Professor at the Energy Department in Politecnico di Milano, who is going to take care, starting the presentation about the Sustainable Development Goal number 7, as well as Simona Cornero, who is a young and successful startup CEO and co-founder of FlexiDAO. Simone is going to take care of the Sustainable Development Goal number 9. And last but not least, Gabriele Masera, thanks a lot for being with us. Gabriele Masera is full-time professor and deputy dean of the School of Architecture, Urban Planning and Construction Engineering. And he is going to address the last goal, the Sustainable Development Goal number 11 for today. So before starting, I take the chance to remind you just some brief deadline. Remember that you can apply to the actual challenge and up to the 9th of May, so 4 days remaining. Try to enjoy as much as you can this webinar and get inspiration from our speakers, which is our goal for today. With this, as Nicola said, feel free to make every question that you want in the chat or in the question section. We will address those at the end, generally, of each speaker presentation. So, without further to do, I invite Francesco Grimaccia on stage, and that's it.
Okay, I hope you can see my screen.
Yes, perfectly.
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon to everybody. Thank you for giving me the opportunity of this that sort of inspiration speech. I hope I'll do my best to communicate and maybe inspire some idea. The title I chose was Energy, Climate and Social Development, a Global Perspective. Since in this presentation, I will try to give you a sort of high-level view, my personal view sometimes, and a global perspective of some key ideas regarding, of course, energy. I work at Energy Department in Politecnico, but with some strong link with other very important, let's say, macro trend that we face in the next years and decades. Let me start from an important fact, just to understand how much the topic of energy is important, but also linked to sustainability. And I will spend a few words about this in the next few slides. More than 1 billion of people do not have access to electricity. So that's a key message to understand, in my personal view, what will be the gap of some slides you will see about digitalization, smart services, city, and so on, taking in mind that some people do not have met the one of the key assets to have, let's say, a sustainable life, as we can define. When we speak about sustainability, we should have in mind that we should be sustainable in terms of environment, but also social and economic aspect. And of course, we see this intrinsic bond between energy and development. Without energy, it's very difficult to, for example, sanitize water, store food and drugs, enhance agriculture. But very important is also guarantee good scholar opportunities, telecommunication opportunities, trade and industrial, let's say, startup and welfare. So keep in mind that what we will say and see is not for everyone today. And that is also a big challenge, to try to share the development to people that today doesn't have or do not have this opportunity. With a global perspective, if we look about the energy consumption, you can see toward 2040 what is the, let's say, primary energy demand in terms of megatoe. This is the unit, and you will see the outlook. And in yellow, you can find the countries that are increasing or expecting to increase, and in the dark orange, let's say, or red, the countries that are decreasing their energy demand. And then you can see that we have a sort of double-fold world with some people that increase and some countries that increase and some others that decrease. And we have this interesting opposite trend where well-developed countries and industrial countries are facing a decreasing of energy consumption. For many reasons. Reason about new, let's say, children that in developed countries are not so high, so the growth of population is one. Some other aspect that we will touch about the energy efficiency and let's say technology that can save energy or primary energy consumption. But if we speak about what do we need, and we want to see in a graphical way, that's I like this slide, because you can see that this small orange circle is the world total energy demand, yearly demand. So every year we need more or less 18 terawatt hour yearly, not terawatt hour, but terawatt year per year. And in this slide, you can also see on this side the so-called renewable sources. The big one are solar and wind, but then we have other solar sources. So in this case, the availability of the resource, you can see, can renew every year. And then we have the bad guys on the right side, so natural gas, petroleum, uranium, and coal, that of course these sources are finite. The bad guys, as we call. But if we link the topic of energy to human development and social development, of course we can link the topic of energy to, let's say, carbon footprint and environmental issues. If we see in a very, very, very large time scales, the atmospheric carbon dioxide in the last, let's say, 1 billion years, you can see this sort of alert threshold of, let's say, 300, if I can read parts per million. And if you see the final part, that is our life context, in the last, let's say, 70 years, we had and face a tremendous increase in this, let's say, carbon dioxide level. This means that you can face, as you well know, I mean, very, very dangerous, let's say, events like desertification, trouble with ice, with atmospheric, let's say, event like storms or very severe atmospheric, let's say, weather condition, and of course the level of ocean that can be dangerous also for our lives. So climate change represents a key issue. The whole target was to reach to let's say decrease this carbon footprint, but also increase energy efficiency and increase the renewable energy source quota. And the European emission challenge by 2050 are very, very, very challenging. And I'm sorry, the presentation is in English, but some slides have also some Italian. I beg your pardon. But of course, the sector of electricity is one of the key player in this kind of reduction strategy in terms of carbon footprint. And one key message I want to give you is that, of course, the ICT and digital technologies will be fundamental in this, and I will keep this concept and come back to this in the next slides. Of course, the renewable energy sources, being not finite and also reducing the emissions, can give a large contribution in these targets. What are the main renewable energy sources? We cited solar and wind sources. When we speak about solar, we can have thermal aspects, so the production of heat or electricity, so photovoltaic, let's say using land, but also using water ponds. So we can have the choice to exploit the so-called floating PV, floating photovoltaics, like in the right corner. The other big renewable source is, of course, wind, and we divide mainly offshore technology and onshore wind with, let's say, drawbacks and advantages in all these kind of technologies. But we do not have just this kind of renewable energy source. We can also have new ideas and what I call non-conventional or not conventional renewable energy source. So a startup here in Lombardy is proposing a power bump, so recovering energy from traffic. KiteGen is a project that want to use, let's say, the wind potential in a quite original way. And wave energy is also another promising source. We have to say that what we find in this slide is not conventional, and so not at an industrial phase, let's say. But if we produce energy, of course, we have to transport and distribute energy. I don't want to spend too much words on that, but the old system was to have a big power plant. The oldest in Italy was in close to Milan Duomo, the Santa Radegonda power plant in 1884. But the old, let's say, centric approach in the grid infrastructure is now lead the pace to a new paradigm. You have, of course, heard about the smart grid, but one of the key challenge of the penetration of renewable energy source is that you have power flows not from a central power plant to the, let's say, final end user, but of course you have many power flows in different points of the grids, and this is quite an issue for stability reason, and also let's say economic and management of the power grid. So the new paradigm is not a centric system, as it is a distributed system, and we are now going in what I call the Internet of Energy. That means that many people in the future will be able to produce their energy by themselves in a distributed manner, using an infrastructure that was born in a centric design view. And this, of course, you will be able to exploit the maybe storage facility or other technology that can mitigate this issue, but you want to produce energy where you consume energy in a, let's say, distributed system. And then you also change the paradigm in terms of the way of conceive energy. And we are going towards a model that the European Commission defined the energy community paradigm, where a wide range of energy action involve the final user, the final citizens, that can maybe not only produce and consume, but also share their energy among the local communities. But you have to change your thinking and to change your mind. Then, of course, if you want to found a startup, my suggestion is follow the money. I put in this slide, sorry, that's an Italian-centric slide, is our Piano Nazionale di Ripresa e Resilienza, practically the recovery fund that every European country has to propose for the next year in order to recovery after the COVID situation. But if you look at the money and numbers, some keywords come back. I already used that, and I will use that keywords also in the final part of the presentation. That is, more than 40 billions are on digitalization and innovation. Almost 60 billions are in green revolution and ecological transition projects. And again, 25 billions goes towards infrastructure for sustainable mobility. So if you sum all these, more than 50% of the budget is going for digital, energy, and green revolution. Of course, infrastructure, touching also the mobility. Again, when you speak about sustainable mobility, again, you have a different use of the energy source for mobility. So we have these kind of opposite trends. you would like to have a distributed generation, but you face, at least in a pre-COVID era, you face an urbanization, let's say, trend. And when you have a high density of people, you have to face problem of managing energy, water, transport, health, safety, communication, environment, services. So from an engineering point of view, it's not so efficient to put together all the people in a city, let's say, increasing a high demand in a, let's say, small surface. And this opposite trend will let's say, pose the question, but after the COVID-19 era, should think about smart big city, or we would like to recover small villages that are connected by maybe fiber optics or other ICT technology? These are a sort of philosophic question that we should face when all this tragedy maybe will be solved some way. Of course, I will go fast on this slide. If we want to have a sustainable development, we need telecommunication infrastructure, because one of the human target is communicating. But we have also to think about the impact on mobility, electric mobility, and again, sharing economy. I don't know about the sharing economy after this pandemic era. Would you like to share a car with some potential, let's say, other people that you don't know? Maybe or not. In any case, the trend of, let's say, increasing in electric cars towards the next 2 decades, it's really a trend that you will face. And again, you will be able not to charge your car in a public infrastructure, maybe a petrol station, but you will have maybe in your box your charging facility, your fuel, let's say. And then you have to produce electricity. I will skip this slide, but of course, also building and living. I think that my colleague in the last presentation will touch this topic, but you have huge opportunity in reducing emissions and make a sustainable countries. Also, from my perspective, reducing the energy consumption of building, but of course you can do more. Internet of Energy means that you can connect through ICT infrastructure many devices and power plant facility and objects that in some way are related to energy. But then, if you have an ICT infrastructure, you can also share data and knowledge and transform data that have no, let's say, task or target into information, where you can use, for example, artificial intelligence or data analytics in order to, let's say, through IoT or digital sensor, in order to retrieve information that you can use to reduce the final energy consumption of a car, a plant, a building, and so on. So the role of digital and digitalization is also because it's strictly related to the energy consumption and, at the end of the day or at the end of the story, the carbon footprint of your human activities, mobility, communicating, living in a flat, and so on. But of course, you open up also when you make intelligence and analytics into objects. If you mix data, objects, and algorithms, you can use this for digital transformation, advanced production, advanced energy plant that you remotely control and optimize in order to for example, follow your demand and so on. I will skip this slide because it's how to use artificial intelligence combined with physical methods, statistical methods, and so on. But at the end of the story, you link a networks of knowledge and infrastructure. So data, again, as I said, data, object, and algorithms going towards a collaborative innovation for human and technological development. So the Internet of Data becomes Internet of Things, but things that produce and consume energy becomes a sort of Internet of Energy. And of course, when you share knowledge, you share research, you can cross-fertilize, and you can see, for example, advances in other science, like, for example, material science, where Lev Perovsky discovered a typical rocks in the Ural Mountains, where you can produce advanced and high-efficient photovoltaic cells, for example. The data, knowledge, and sharing is a fundamental asset in order to improve your development and, of course, going toward a sustainable innovation. So I would like to summarize what are in my mind the key factors for a sustainable innovation. Of course, you have to develop new knowledge, but the idea is not enough. You have to have a green and environmental impact, a positive impact. You can also meet social needs, as we see at the start of my presentation. You should have also an affordable and economic development of your new idea. And of course, you have to be able to adapt to change. So I would like to close my presentation that, of course, it was fast in just 20 minutes. We touch maybe many points, but saying that challenges for human and climate change can be seen as a sort of not holistic view, but they are intrinsically linked with energy and environment, but also to digital infrastructure and physical infrastructure. And Internet of Things and Internet of knowledge will be maybe the crucial tale in order to face the macro trend of global population growth, increasing in energy demand, and of course, try to give answer to new lifestyle and job requirements that today, after this, let's say, pandemic era, have and still have, in my view, a sort of, let's say, open question mark. But the revolution is already started, was already started. I close with a famous words of a sheikh: the Stone Age didn't end for lack of stone, and the oil age will end long before the world run out of oil. So I hope that my presentation was somehow inspiring from your side, and thank you very much for your attention, and I hope that you enjoyed this short speech. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Grimaccia, for your, I think, holistic presentation regarding this sustainable development goal. And so we can start with the Q&A session for this goal. You can, everyone can write down the question, and I'm going to read it. Well, I think that I had a question. I think that you, Professor, touched different topics, and I want to ask if you had to choose one particular hot topic that you are going to see the key topic in the next decade, we can say, because, for example, electrical cars, electrical vehicles are now present. So we can say what will be the next big thing in
if I was, let's say, 2 years ago, I probably would have gave you this answer, the sharing economy. So you don't want to be the owner of your car, so you will go to a world that is, let's say, using services, so the mobility service more than the ownership of a car, electric or let's say conventional car. Today my question is maybe a bit different, so I don't have a unique answer. Of course, we will face after these years some social and economic, let's say, issues, and so maybe the winner countries will be that countries that will be able to combine, let's say, the social sustainability with technological development and so on. Electric cars are very, very expensive. It is not a technology for all at this stage, and in the next years, I mean, the European concept of energy communities, so the ability to use and share energy, it's a big issue, a big challenge, maybe in a small district, and also to recover. If we think to Italy, we have wonderful small villages, maybe where you can live and also work, if the paradigm of let's say, the so-called smart working or remote working, I don't know how to define, that will be a big issue. And I'm curious about the last presentation, but because the big question is, shall we live in very big and connected city, or should we recover, let's say, a distributed sort of living in small villages connected by ICT, where you produce and use energy locally? That can be, but that's a sort of philosophic question.
No, yes, I agree to a large extent, and at the same time, it's a paradox because in Italy, for example, we are struggling to keep alive those small towns and villages that could be an efficient solution for this problem. So I agree.
And again, all the topics are linked to each other, because if you do not have to go Monday to Friday in the big city, like imagine Milan as a metropolis, then you have a hinterland. But if you cancel in the new world that need of mobility, mobility for work or mobility for pleasure, that's my question. And mobility means, again, energy consumption, carbon footprint, the use of the resource, emissions, and so on. So
maybe in this startup challenge we will find a solution for this issue.
But in my view, the human is when an idea is human-centric, many times is a successful idea. So don't forget the human being and the human behavior when you think about not only a technology, but in general a service or a startup.
So now I'm going to read a question from Marta Provera. So how can you deal with the problem of the production of energy for charging electric cars? I mean, if it's not produced sustainably, could it in the end annihilate the advantages of the low electric cars emissions?
Very good question. Thank you. I didn't put the right emphasis on that. Of course, when we speak about electric cars, we speak about how do you use electricity for mobility, but how can you produce that electricity? Of course, we can be optimistic having 30-40% of electric energy produced by renewable energy sources. But you can also imagine 50% of, but you can't have, let's say, just renewable energy production, because our lifestyle, if you want to charge your vehicle during the night, generally you don't have the sun or wind, so you need storage, but also the storage technology has some environmental issues about materials and so on. So my question is, as much as possible, of course, maybe you can also imagine to use, for example, charging facility during the day when you are at work, if you will be at work, or when your car is stopped. But remember that for 90% of the population, let's say a simple car is not a so efficient engineering machine, because most of the time is stopped and parked. So again, the conceiving the mobility as a service is really a fancy idea, but you have to convince people to not being the owner of a car, and that's another story.
So next question is from Denisa, and I'm going to translate it. Assessing pros and cons of electric vehicles and electric cars and hydrogen cars. Why electric cars gain this much relevance, importance? Is it only a mode or something else?
Let's say, of course, you do not have any time in the story, you don't have the perfect technology. The electric mobility, electric car have, of course, many advantages in terms of, for example, noise, emission, and so on. One of the big drawbacks is the energy intensity that you can have with a standard fuel, for example, with many liters of some fuels, you can have maybe thousands of kilometers range. And one of the drawbacks of the e-mobility, in my view, at this stage, is the charging infrastructure and the, let's say, relatively small range that you have in the let's say, range of mobility of your vehicle. I don't know if I answered to the question. I mean, if your lifestyle is a, let's say, city lifestyle, where the range of your mobility is, or your target is to move from point A to point B, and it's just a few kilometers, the electric vehicles is fantastic, let's say. But of course, it depends on your lifestyle. And again, the charging infrastructure, imagine if you are in a condominium and you do not have the possibility to charge your own car in the box. So you should conceive a public infrastructure. But again, the system is not fully ready to have a full electric mobility. Regarding the hydrogen, is not my main focus of research, but again, we need many years before, let's say, having the hydrogen, let's say, in the mobility sector, in my view. Also because in the last few years, not only for Toyota, but also other manufacturers, the hybridization of standard, let's say, combustion engine and electric engine let's say, give a proof of concept also, and the time to develop also the sector.
Next question is from Michele. Already developed countries are slowed down in the energetic and social transition, in part because they are already established regarding both infrastructure and society. Do you think that emerging countries will accept to revisit their steps in order to avoid the mistakes of developed countries? How important is that developing countries develops eco-friendly?
Very, very good question. Thank you very much. That's a big challenge. I totally agree with the student question, and but I don't know. I don't have the answer to this question. I mean, I had the hope that the developing countries will not make the mistakes that we made before, and they will be able to go for let's say, green technologies. But let's say that is my hope, but I'm not so certain 100% on that.
Okay, perfect. So for Denisa, I'm going to read the last question at the end of the event, so we can go on, if it's okay for you, Professor Grimaccia.
Yes,
so we can go through the presentation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So now it's time for Simone Acornero. So Simone, take the stage.
Hi, thanks a lot, and thanks a lot, Professor. It was really interesting. I'm an energy engineer, so I heard, but it was refreshing view. Thanks a lot for the overview. So thanks a lot for inviting me and giving me this opportunity. So from me, don't expect at all. I'm not a professor. Actually, I was where you are. I think, well, I guess most of you are right now. I was 4 years ago. And so essentially here, what I'm planning to do is to tell you a bit my story, how I went from being a student involved in entrepreneurship clubs to having a startup that is in 2 locations in Europe, having raised a total of 2 million euros with 15 employees, sharing all the learnings and the fuck-ups that we did along the way. And then trying to give my perspective of what I see in the market. So what fellow startups are doing. And essentially the reason why I'm doing this is because I think that generally speaking, entrepreneurs are very brave people that decide to take on a challenge, but at the same time, they're very... I've never found a group that is has so much solidarity between each other as entrepreneurs. And that's something that I like a lot, and that's why I always like to join these clubs, give my perspective, not at all as a visionary Zuckerberg. That's not at all, but really I think that sharing mistakes and sharing learnings always helps. It helped me a lot. When I started, I really relied a lot on fellow entrepreneurs that were very kind to me and decided to give a thought on the business model or an idea, or just share the story. It's something that helped me massively, and that's why I'm always very happy to do these kind of things. And in this regard, I always find it very hard to speak for 30 minutes without seeing any face, hearing any noise. I don't know if you're falling asleep or not. So if there's anything that I say that you like me to deep dive or that is not clear, or don't wait for the Q&A session whatsoever. At least I know that you're not falling asleep. And maybe I can deep dive on something that is more interesting to you than other topics. So, closing this remark, as it was said during the introduction, the goal that I will be focusing on is the goal number 9. The goal number 9 is very, very wide. It touches industries, innovation, and infrastructure. Coming from what I come, I will focus on innovation, and specifically innovation in Europe, and more specific in the context of energy and CO2 emissions, because that's where I work, that's where I have the experience. Being said so, by no means think that this is the only scope of the of this goal 9. It's much wider. It tackles taking internet to all the people that don't have still today internet connection, infrastructure, and so on and so forth. I'm not an expert whatsoever in this kind of goals. So really what I will focus on is how you can be an entrepreneur, starting from being a student, sharing my lessons, the lessons that I've learned, and hopefully give you a bit of hints on what customers and what the market is saying, and what input we've been receiving as a startup, and what I see that VCs, so venture capitalists, investors, business angels, accelerators, what are the hot topics in the so-called clean tech environment in Europe. So with all of these intro, let me quickly share. I think, wait, sorry. I need to share this. Do you see my screen?
Yep, perfectly.
Okay, perfect. So very, very quickly, myself, I'm Simone. I'm an energy engineer as background. I studied at the University of Bologna for my bachelor, and then I studied at KU Leuven in Belgium, at the Polytechnic University of Catalonia in Barcelona, where I'm currently living. I actually, so my master was in renewable energy and smart cities. And during my master studies, that's when I found what is currently one of my best friends and also co-founder of the company, who is a Polish guy, is the CTO. Along the way, I met another great guy, who is our third co-founder, who is the chief commercial officer that studied at ESADE, who is the Spanish Bocconi, I would say. So first of all, I think that the very first message that I want to give is widen your network and don't think to launch a startup only with engineers. We all think alike. You need people that challenge your view and that remind you that there's a business and there's a customer out of our technical world. So this is a very first important learning. But except for that, as I said, when I was studying my master, that's when I started looking into entrepreneurship opportunities, and that's eventually. Then I will go a bit more in detail into the story, but that's essentially when we founded FlexiDAO. FlexiDAO, it's our startup. We are a software company. We are based in Barcelona and Amsterdam. And to frame what we do, I like to share the mission and vision. So the mission is essentially we build software solutions. So we develop technology and we provide advisory to help businesses consume zero carbon electricity in a transparent, environmental impactful way. And I'll deep dive what this actually means. And then we have a long-term vision. I don't know whether the professor shares it or not, but I believe that there would be a fundamental change in how renewable energy is procured and is certified. Then I will also go into that, transitioning into almost a real-time or an hourly way of viewing renewable energy, which is currently not existent in the market. To give you just an overview of our products and services, by far our core product is called Respring. It's a software platform that we sell both to energy retailers. I'm speaking of Edison, Enel, these kind of companies, and also to large multinational, large energy suppliers. We work with the companies like Vodafone, Unilever, Google, Microsoft, these kind of large companies. We're present in 9 countries. We have 38 large corporate buyers, so these large multinationals that buy and consume energy. And we track around 5 gigawatt hour of renewable energy per day. This is by far the most our product that is getting the most traction. Then we have a second platform which is actually very much in the R&D phase, and it's something also the professor touched upon, which is energy sharing and renewable energy communities. We have some ongoing pilot projects, so it's far from being commercial, but we're doing some work in Italy, Spain, Norway, and Ireland. In Italy, we have a project in the city of Trento with Edison, the retailer. And then Energy Tag is a non-profit. It's an NGO that we co-funded together with other industry players, that touches upon what I said before of our long-term vision called 24/7. I don't think this is the time to let you know about what 24/7 is, but for whoever is interested, Google published a very, very nice white paper explaining why they're adopting a 24/7 strategy. We're buying renewable energy. And I think it does a much better job than me at explaining what it is. But it's essentially our vision, and Energy Tag is a coalition, a non-profit coalition of different players in the market that is lobbying with the European Commission, and we have a global footprint in changing the way renewable energy is currently certified through a mechanism called guarantees of origin. Just to give you an idea of our partners and stakeholders, this is just a few names. We have more, but essentially, as I said, we work both on one side with the energy retailers, and on the other side, we work with the end consumers. So we have this dual business model. So effectively, we're a platform facilitating data exchanges between these two sides of the value chain in the renewable energy in the energy space. Then, if you're interested, I can deep dive. But again, this is not supposed to be a sales pitch of our company, and I want to be done with the slides as soon as possible to go what I think it's the more interesting part. But just to give you an idea, this slide is a bit outdated, but just to give you an idea of the trajectory. So our journey officially started in October 2017. So that's when we funded the company. Before then, as I said, we started doing some entrepreneurial activity. So basically kind of being involved in these kind of clubs, entrepreneurship club, the same thing that we're actually doing here. We did it in a way that, so our master was the EIT No Energy Master. I think that the ones that at least come from energy engineering at the Polytechnic of Milan have heard this, because you have a lot of students that end up in doing this master. But we started, so we were encouraged to look at the entrepreneurial side and the business side of everything that we were studying during our master. And this kind of gave me the drive, together with what then became my co-founder, to always look at things and propose things to the university with a business angle. And at the time, there was also the first big wave of blockchain projects. It was like 2016. It was where like Bitcoin was starting to be a bit mainstream. And that's essentially, it's when we said, okay, we are really interested in seeing how we can apply blockchain to smart grids, microgrids, energy communities, and so on and so forth. We started developing business models. We started developing, of course, also technology and blah, blah, blah. You need to have a drive. You really need to be entrepreneurial. You need to have it in the spirit. And we managed to do a joint thesis, me and my future partner, what was going to be future partner. And basically, we ended up with the thesis that had like some quite strong technical element, but also had a business side of it. And with that, we started go and look for money, essentially. And we were lucky enough that EIT No Energy, the same people that we started with, so that they accepted and organized our master. They were also our first investors that gave us 85,000 euros to get started. With this money, we managed to find the first customer, Acciona, which is a big renewable energy developer and retailer in Spain. And that is the very first big milestone, because when you have such a big company that bets on you, it's much, much easier to do the next sale. And the next sale was Iberdrola, and that had, which is one of the biggest energy companies in the world, especially if we talk about renewable energy. It's one of the major competitors of Enel. And from then, we managed to get more and more traction. We signed with more utilities, E.ON, thourough, Ørsted, also very big names in the energy sector. And then this created the traction to actually go and look for a Series A. Series A is, well, a seed round, sorry, not yet Series A. It's when a venture capital firm first believed in us, gave us 1 million euros with the option that then was triggered of another 500,000. And that's really when we started scaling the startup. We opened up an office in Amsterdam and continuing our operations in Barcelona. And we kept signing more contracts with retailers, grew the team. And then COVID hit, which kind of put a break to all our fast growth and expansion. But still, we managed to close some important contracts. The transition from a pilot to a real revenue, it's called recurring revenue contract, is very challenging. But that's when investors really started looking at you, when you move from one-timer revenue to recurring revenue. So like you have steady cash flowing in every month. We managed to do that with Acciona, with Total, with EDP. We signed an important strategic partnership with Red Eléctrica España, which is essentially the Spanish Terna. And we also decided to increase our outreach towards customers, starting selling also to end consumers, which we're not doing at the beginning. And that's when finally, early this year, we signed our first contract directly with the end consumer without going through a channel, which is the energy supplier, which was Vodafone. I'm saying all of this because it's a very long journey, and still, after all of this time, after 3.5 years, ups and downs, with a lot of dedication, still we're just getting started. We still need to find the best way to tackle the market, to serve our customer. We keep learning, but it's an extremely exciting journey that I feel extremely not proud, but extremely lucky to be having. And that's why, I want to share out my story, and I want to try and convince as many people, not convince, but like share what I learned along the way with as many people as possible. I think that with this, I'm done with slides. But so now, in terms of, I think, a few key things that I learned along the way, and I see the first question, perfect, means that you're not falling asleep. What kind of competencies were present in the first FlexiDAO team? I got started with a colleague of mine, an engineer also, but very complementary to me. Is currently our CTO, and I'm the CEO. So I'm CEO, I'm just to get rid of stupid labels. Essentially what I do, I'm the link between the IT team and the commercial team. And I mainly talk to customers. I manage the delivery to the customers. So we were fundamentally two very different profiles. I'm more business oriented. I can talk to people. I don't have any problem going fundraising, explaining ideas. It's very important to complex subjects that you need to pitch in 1, 2, 3 minutes. It's very important that you understand it very well and you help people understanding them. So we were, although two engineers, two very different profiles, but we realized very, very soon that two engineers doing a startup end up nowhere. So that's why we immediately went and looked for a very different profile that complemented us. And is now the third co-founder. He used to work at sales at Google, and then he was a consultant at Bain. It's a strategic consulting based in London. Well, in many other countries, but he was based in London. So finding complementary skills is fundamental from the very start, and complement them along the way. So it's very easy to hire somebody in which you see yourself, but that's a very bad mistake that you can do. Try to bring people that bring different backgrounds, I'm not only talking about gender and race, but also education, but also gender and race is very important. Keep the environment as diverse as possible to have people that bring different views that can challenge you, because the ability of interacting and collecting feedback is one of the best skills that you could ever have as an entrepreneur. If you think that your first idea is what you will make you rich, you're extremely wrong. I don't know any entrepreneur that ended up building a business on the very first idea. Nobody. So really the ability of building this diverse team is extremely important. We started with 2 engineers, very focused on pilots, R&Ds. We were developing tech even before having a customer. Terrible idea. We wasted a lot of money. I think that like 90% of the money that InnoEnergy gave us initially was wasted in useless projects that by applying the 101 of a startup, we would have avoided. By simply the fact that we're 2 engineers, we did not see that. We saw like, okay, we know what we are doing, let's do and build it. Without having a customer, very wrong idea. How did you convince other people? Other question, how did you convince other people to join the project, especially at early stage? In our case, it was actually the person that reached out to us. It was a person that was kind of tired of his job and wanted to change. Generally speaking, it's very difficult to find a co-founder. I was very lucky. You need to share, you need to pitch your idea. Don't go to meetups, go to accelerators, go to events, share. Don't be scared of sharing your idea. Don't be scared that somebody will steal it. Because if you keep it yourself, you're not validating, you're not finding networks, you're not learning, you're not doing anything of this. So just go out, share your idea, and eventually you will find the person that gets as excited as you when you speak about your idea. You really need to see the sparkle in their eyes. You need to see that it triggers what it triggers in you, and that you can pull all-nighters together, that you can go through all the bad times that will be there. And that's really when you find your co-founder. In my case, I was lucky enough that he found us. But I know many other startups that went out looking for co-founders. Don't be scared of sharing your shares. Don't be scared of putting. Of course, they have way of protecting you. But really, don't think that this is a journey you can do by yourself, because it will end up bad. And also, bear in mind that investors at the start invest in people much more than the idea. Because the idea can change, the business model can change, the go-to-market strategy can change. The founding team is really what will not change. So having a sound founding team that is diverse in background, knowledge, know-how, experience is fundamental, because eventually that is what will convince investors in early stage to give money to you. How much time passed since you start to hire someone, and for what skills did you need some? The first one was a developer, because we found a customer and then we had to deliver. So at that point we needed hands, because I self-taught myself to code, but I'm not a coder. So we had to buy an IT. We had to contract a developer that is still in the team. He's one of the core. We have 4 managers in the team, and he's one of the core. He's almost like at the founder level. And he was the first hire, but that really depends on the need. So it really depends on the business model that you're pushing. It really depends what I would say is that, first of all, you need people that sell your idea, even before you need people that build it. Once you have, so the best case scenario, I know it sounds like maybe you've heard this many times, but the best case scenario is that you have somebody telling you, yes, I want it, before you build it. If you get this, I mean, it's amazing. Very difficult to get there, very difficult to get there, but sometimes it's possible. Is your business as you planned at the beginning? No, absolutely not. Or did you have face some changes in your activities? Many changes. We got started, we wanted to develop a market for local exchanges of renewable energy, some kind of peer-to-peer when it was still fancy. That was the very initial idea. Then while we were trying to sell it, basically we realized that we were talking to a lot of innovation departments, and that there was no route to market. There was we couldn't see any short-term opportunity of somebody actually saying, yeah, I will pay for this in a recurring way. As long as I have some innovation budget that I can throw somewhere, yeah, it's fine, I can pay you, but you don't build a scalable business that way. So we realized it the hard way, and then we were lucky enough that exactly at the same time, Acciona, this our first client, published a challenge online saying, like, we have this problem. Whoever can help us solve it in the best way, we will go for it and we'll do a pilot together. So somehow we managed to convince them. We signed the pilot, we built the platform, it was a success, and then from there it scaled up. So we're not doing something that we planned initially, and then it kind of build up from there, learning from the market and adapting our value proposition to what the market is requesting, because in the end you need to listen to the market.
Sorry, Simone. I think we can address like one last question from Denisa, and maybe. And
then I'll continue. Yeah.
Okay, if you agree, and then we can.
Of course. No problem. Yeah. Sorry. Which was the most difficult moment that you faced during the building process of your startup? Many. We never had like real problems, but when you start having employees and the cash starts feeling low, then those are not nice times. But I would say that the worst part was the COVID. The first months of COVID were extremely difficult, trying to keep all the employees, reaching out to people, not being able to have any meetings, and trying to sell and getting no, and still trying to persevere and sell. That has been very, very, very challenging. The first 6 months of COVID were really challenging. But so enough for the questions, then you can keep them flowing and then we'll touch them upon later. But essentially, going back to what I was saying before, so how we got where we are and what is the ecosystem, the innovation ecosystem in Europe, from our perspective, of course, of what we live. So in general, EIT, so the European Institute of Technology, really gave us a great hand. It's a massive accelerator. And it's not just EIT No Energy, it's EIT Digital, EIT Smart Mobility, EIT Raw Material. They all have EIT Climate, etc. I would really advise to somehow be involved. Reach out. That does not mean study with them, but there are many other ways to be involved. So I think that from that perspective, the EIT really creates a massive network or like-minded people that know what it means to come from an education background and try to be entrepreneurs. It gives you the framework, it gives you the knowledge, it gives you the network. In many cases, it gives you the money and equity-free money. EIT No Energy does not do that, but EIT Digital, EIT Climate, they all have incubation programs that give you equity-free money. it's very important when you get started to look for equity-free money. The money that you raise at the start of your startup is the most expensive money that you could ever find, because your equity is still valued very low, and hopefully it will grow. So EIT definitely would be a good advice, but really now there are so many incubation opportunities that it's really hard to count them and to list them all. What I can say, I mean, the most famous ones are Rockstart, based in the Netherlands. It's a really famous one that is now, it's also outreaching. We had an amazing time and help with Rockstart. Techstars is also another amazing ecosystem where I've heard great things of many startups working in Techstars. They really help a lot. But now companies, and they all have some open innovation environment. They all have some opportunities. Try to, at the beginning, I think I was spending at least 2 or 3 hours a day sending out applications. Prioritize non-equity and try to gather and to make the most out of the European ecosystem of innovation, because it's really becoming something. And Europe also, once you get started through H2020 programs, SME, which now it's called EIC Accelerator, Europe really gives a lot of opportunity and a lot of money to entrepreneurs that want to try. So I think that for us, that helped a lot. And especially, again, EIT, it really helped a lot. It really gave us this initial stamp that kind of transformed us from being students to be like people that companies like Acciona accept to sit down with. It's not easy to organize meetings at the start. Having an incubator at the start, it really, really helps. So there you just reach out, because Europe finally has this ecosystem that you can take advantage of. So that would be one of my first advices. And most importantly, once you are inside, don't be shy. Talk to startups. There are many, many, many startups in Europe. Reach out. Maybe they don't answer to you. That's okay. Entrepreneurs are busy. Don't stop there. Continue. Reach out, talk, learn, talk to other startups. At the beginning, the nice thing of these ecosystems is that you're all facing the same challenges and you can share them. You're all at the pilot stage. You're all at finding the first customer stage. So share. Join ecosystems, join clubs like this, and share. Then more practically, I think also as a kind of innovation, and what we hear a lot, to give you some ideas for the challenge. Generally speaking, electrification is a massive topic. So transforming energy, so activities that now use an energy vector, heat, gas, or whatever, transform it into electricity. That's a massive topic, and how to make it renewable. But more specific, because it is very broad. There's a very big focus of companies wanting to be green. And especially what I see a lot of startups coming up lately is on the new solutions about carbon credits. Carbon credits and carbon offsets are basically this opportunity that companies like, I emit a lot of CO2, and then I buy a carbon credit somewhere that lets me reduce it. And this is not necessarily the cap and trade ETS scheme that EU has. It's a voluntary global market that companies do. So it's not the mandatory EU ETS. It's a voluntary global market that is extremely opaque. It is receiving a lot of criticism in how you account for the CO2 and how you prove it. And really, I'm seeing a lot of new startups. I'm in touch with Rockstart. They have, I think, 3 startups in the latest batch out of 8. So Rockstart chooses every year 8 startups out of, I think, 400 that apply. 3 of them have solutions for CO2. CO2 accounting CO2, proving that you are removing something, creating some kind of new credit. There are really a lot of startups that do amazing work around this, and I think it's a topic in which AI, blockchain, data science, marketplaces, there's really a massive amount of opportunity, and it's a market that is booming. It's really booming. There are companies like Advanced Infrastructure that is very new, and they are trying to use AI to calculate very accurately CO2 emissions of very specific locations of the grid. You have startups like Climate with the K that is trying to create credits out of carbon capture. And you have concepts like carbon sinks, in which you want to actually find a business model to not plant new trees, but actually to make sure that the ones that are there stay there, which I think is much more important. Well, it's as important. So carbon credits markets, etc. It's really a space in which is happening a lot of innovation, a lot of hype, and a lot of market. It's a massive market. It's really a massive market. Another point is, I think, something very hot. It's sustainability reporting for corporates. Now, every corporate in the last few years is doing a transformation. It's being put under a lot of scrutiny and a lot of pressure, and finally, sustainability topics are reaching C-levels. So CEOs, CFOs, COOs. Sustainability reports need to be communicated to the supervisory board of every corporate. Pension funds, investors, they all make decisions on which shares of which companies to include in their portfolio based on the sustainability ratings. There's never been as much pressure on corporates to be sustainable and to be green and to report it transparently as today. And it is a very widespread belief that in a few years from now, the same way companies do financial accounting, P&L, balance sheets, and so on, the same will happen for CO2, and the same will happen for sustainability. There are a lot of work being done on standardizing how you count CO2, how you count the impact that you have along your supply chain, etc., etc. This is a massive market also, helping, which is partially what we do, focusing on renewable energy and CO2 emissions, but helping or finding solutions that can make calculations of CO2 more accurate, more reliable, that can make more efficient data exchanges, that can help companies track the supply chain of a certain product to be able to say this piece has this embedded CO2. These are really, really big market. And overall, it's called Scope 3. It's how much your supply chain emits. This, I really think that it's a massive market, and we are getting a lot of attention, and we see a lot of startups succeeding in these spaces.
Simone, sorry to interrupt you.
No.
We are a bit going late with the time, so I thank you very much for your speech. I'm sure there are like thousands more of argument to talk about. Guys, keep on sharing your question in the chat. They are very valuable. And thanks to Simone for the speech. And we are going to address, as usual, question at the end if there is still time. Now we take the chance to introduce the next speaker, which is Professor Masera, about goal number 11. We are waiting for Professor Masera to turn the camera on. Okay, in the meanwhile that we wait for the professor to join us, maybe he is having some technical issues. I don't know about it. I would address a question that Denisa made to Professor Grimaccia at the beginning of the presentation. So, Professor Grimaccia, if you want, I can read the question to you. You are in mute, Professor. The microphone.
We have originally a schedule of half an hour each. Maybe someone should advise the other professor that at 7 o'clock, maybe. Okay.
Okay, here we are, Professor Mazera.
In the meanwhile, I can give a very, very short answer if you...
Sure. About the question was about how much are actually photovoltaic and solar panels sustainable from the production perspective mainly?
Yes, let's say if we balance the pros and cons, we can say that, of course, the photovoltaic technology can be conceived also a sustainable technology. We have some new interesting technologies that are called organic cells, but they are at the research stage. But in any case, you can also, in a circular economy way, think to recover material from used, let's say, photovoltaic assets. So yeah, my answer is positive on that aspect. But I don't want to.
Okay.
Gabriele? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you perfectly.
Okay, I'm truly sorry. I had my camera and microphone on, and I started speaking, and I thought you were actually hearing me, but you didn't.
No, don't worry.
Sorry about that.
No
I
worries.
was here, although you couldn't see me. So okay, I will pick up from where I left as I was speaking. So no, I was just thanking you for inviting me and having me here, and I'm glad to to jump to a different dimension and to a different topic, which is cities, built environment. I come from the Department of Architecture, built environment and construction engineering. And well, actually, I'm a professor in building technology, so I'm a little bit, let's say, cities are a little bit a wider scale than what I deal with normally. However, I was very glad to take this opportunity to share with you also part of my presentation a project I've done with some colleagues about improvements in an informal settlement in a favela in Rio de Janeiro in particular. So I think this is the occasion also to, let's say, discuss a bit the wider problems of cities. So the journey I'm proposing to you in this half hour or so, and I'll also start my timer just to be sure that we are more or less consistent with the timing, is going to be an overview of cities and SDG 11 and how it is articulated, and very, very briefly touching on some possible solutions and aspects related to the different indicators of SDG 11, and then going a little bit down deeper into this project I was talking to you about. So you should be now able to see my screen, and so I'm starting sharing the presentation, and I will skip very briefly. I will skip the part where I say that for the first 10 years after my graduation, I was partly academic and partly entrepreneur also, but I will go to the next part, and I'd like to start with this quote by Renzo Piano, the famous architect and graduate of Politecnico di Milano, who always likes to underline how cities are one of mankind's brilliant inventions. I mean, it's something that started with the beginning of civilization in a way, and it's an invention that has proved incredibly persistent throughout millennia, actually. And I don't actually have an answer to the doubts that my colleague Francesco Grimaccia said earlier about living in small towns or in big cities. But what we can certainly say is that cities have been historically incredibly resistant to different conditions and changing situations, wars, pandemics, change of population. Cities have always been there because probably there are good ideas and good invention to not just economically, but also to make ideas happen through discussion and through proximity to other people. And this kind of mixing is probably the key to success of cities. Indeed, cities are so successful that we have more than half of mankind living in cities today. They are going to increase even more in the next decades, 5 billion by the end of this decade, up from 3.5, as you can see here. By the middle of this century, we expect that the world's population will increase again by 1/3, and 70% of the population will probably live in cities by, again, 2050. So this is, I think, giving you an idea of how we are becoming a more and more urban species. We started rural and we are becoming more and more urban. This is something that you see very well in China, for example. In 30 years, from 1/4 of the population in cities to more than half and counting. So this is a phenomenon that's happening. And personally, I think it will keep happening because of the advantages of cities, because of the importance of physical relationships between people. So we got daunting problems in front of us, actually, which are, okay, how to accommodate these people. Building stock expected to double by 2050 in the world. That's an important point. So on one hand, we got cities which are such amazing inventions, resilient and attractive. On the other hand, we know that they're also, of course, center of consumption, but also inequalities, conflicts. We go back to that. Cities nowadays, they cover 3% of the land on Earth. So very, very tiny percentage, a little bit more concentrated in the north of Italy, as you see from this picture from the ISS. But on the other hand, they consume 60 to 80% of the world's energy, and they emit 3/4 of carbon. So contributing to climate change, as Francesco was saying before. So this is really, you see, crucial. And you could very well say, I think, that we are on the safe side if we say that solutions to global environmental issues are probably going to be urban solutions, so solutions that have to do with cities. And if you're interested about that, I strongly suggest you to take a look to C40, which is a group of 97 of the world's greatest cities, are contributing to a lot of the world's emissions and how they are acting together, finding common solutions, sharing initiatives to reduce the carbon footprint of big cities, essentially. So that's why we have an SDG, a goal dedicated to cities specifically, although, of course, in cities we have many of the other SDGs. I mean, SDGs, of course, are all strictly correlated. Energy, for example, just because it was mentioned, very, very strictly related to what happens in city, climate change, but also all the others. So actually, it's a network, of course. We are simplifying, and I'm concentrating on, as you see, SDG 11, but of course, with many relationships to other tasks and domains, let's say. So SDG 11 says what you can read here: make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. And that's a lot, you see, to chew and digest. So how it's articulated, I'll really go and touch very quickly some aspects. So first aspect, affordable housing and basic services. How do we provide safe housing for the lot of people that are going to go to cities in the next decades? And very often they go to informal settlements. So how do we provide buildings that are affordable and then can maybe grow over time as the economic possibility for inhabitants happens? And we got, for example, incremental housing in some instances, like in this picture. I'm going very quickly, of course, but then if you have specific questions, you can ask me at the end. Transport, of course, that was also mentioned by my colleague before. How to access transport that is sustainable and that caters for need of weaker parts of the population. Of course, the topic is how we connect low carbon ways of moving around. In a wealthy country like Denmark, you can have hubs like these of strong public transport, and then bikes and walking and other means of transportation. But also in poorer countries, there are simpler solutions. This one in Curitiba is very famous, where a relatively simple network of buses that give the perception of entering like a train station really made ridership grow in a very significant way. So BRT in Curitiba, you can find a lot on the internet, reclaiming space on the roads from cars back to people, essentially. Sometimes with very simple solutions that then become more permanent. Think about tactical urbanism, which is also happening here in Milan in many instances, and that can somehow make cities or promote softer and more carbon friendly, environmental friendly ways of transportation. Having communities participate in planning is an important point. Safeguarding world's cultural and natural heritage. I'm not going into this because I think it's pretty clear. Reduce, of course, deaths and the impacts of disasters related to climate change. That's a big aspect. Just in the European Economic Area in the past 40 years, there's an estimate of 446 billion euros as damage by natural disasters, which are made stronger every year because of the climate change and the atmosphere becoming more energetic. This is very important for large urban communities in parts of the world. Think Southeast Asia, which is very exposed to rising sea levels. But also more affluent countries are not, let's say, protected from the rising sea levels. Hurricane Sandy, New York, 2012, Lower Manhattan completely flooded with subway tunnels also included, and $42 billion as a price tag for what happened with Hurricane Sandy. So protection here is, of course, a big point, because climate change is happening and consequences will take place. Air quality, of course, and waste. We got 4.2 million deaths because of ambient pollution every year. 3.8 million more, and this is widely underestimated, by the way, die because of poor air quality inside buildings, because of stoves, because of cooking with poor and polluting systems. And I know that the group of Emanuela Colombo is also working a lot on the topic of cooking. 91% of the world's population lives in places where air quality is so bad, and this is really, of course, crucial point connected to, in general, climate change and environmental quality. Green and public spaces and the relationship of cities to countryside is also a very important aspect. So recognizing countryside as a supporting infrastructure for food and resources to cities. And that means, again, promoting biodiversity in cities and also food production, which is another big topic where a lot of innovation can happen and is happening in terms of providing locally produced food, which is also, of course, has also a side which is related to education, to nutrition, to proper nutrition. So we got many ways which can be explored and expanded of including food production in buildings. And then, of course, because climate change is happening, well, cities have to prepare for climate change. So you might have heard that with climate change, we got two columns, let's say, of what we should do. So adaptation and mitigation and adaptation, to put it better. So reducing the carbon that is emitted by cities. So it's been mentioned before, buildings that are more efficient, but also production of energy integrated in a distributed way on buildings. It's mitigation, one part of mitigation at least, but also adaptation. And this is, again, Lower Manhattan. They are preparing a big infrastructure project to protect Lower Manhattan from rising sea levels. And this is something, of course, it's a big infrastructure project, The price tag is $800 million, something that New York and the United States can afford to pay, of course. Other solutions, more affordable, a bit different, have to be developed for countries that cannot afford, of course, such an expense, such an investment. Okay? And maybe a little bit related to what I just said, supporting least developed countries in improving their construction, building materials, ways of building buildings. We'll see why in a moment. Also utilizing local materials. Just a very, very recent example that's been opened a couple of weeks ago, the Children's Hospital in Uganda, where Renzo Piano Building Workshop and Emergency, where the walls of this hospital are made in rammed earth, so very local material that does not require highly skilled workers, and that's very cheap and relatively traditional. So we got, I mean, as you see, this very, very quick overview, lots of open points, of course, and lots of points which are problems, but also occasions, of course, for innovation and improvement. Very often here in the West and in more industrialized countries, you will hear, it's been also said before, smart cities are somehow very strictly correlated to the idea of the future of cities. That's true, of course. Data, and again, Francesco said it before very clearly, are going to be an important part of the future of cities. When you search, when you Google something about the future of cities, probably they will look something like this. Electric vehicles everywhere, flying stuff probably somewhere in the sky, people on foot, everything very tidy and clean and greenery on buildings, probably something like that. But most people are living like that in the world. And this is where I would like maybe to open up a little bit, maybe unexpected or different point of view on the future of cities. And that's, what we do with these informal settlements. We got today 1.6 billion people already living in inadequate housing globally. 1 billion are living in slums and informal settlements. That's, you understand, a lot of what is happening to humanity nowadays. This is the share where you see population, how much of the population lives in informal settlements. It's a problem that exists mostly in Southeast Asia and Africa. You see different colors here because of the, let's say, total amount of population, which is, we'll see the numbers a little bit more clearly in a moment. What is a slum? Essentially, slum is where you have at least one of these four conditions that I will read very quickly. So, water source, poor quality of water source, lack of access to improved sanitation facilities, and you see some numbers here that are not staying on, but I will, of course, leave you the presentation. Lack of sufficient living areas, so overcrowding inside buildings, or the durability of dwellings, so the quality of the materials and how these houses are built, or because of the location, flooding areas or landslides, places that are dangerous by themselves. Plus sometimes the possibility of being evicted, which is also a very important aspect here. So we got that big amount of the world's population living in these conditions. And that means higher disease rates, means malnutrition or hunger, means less access to education, so improving your life, and in general, shorter life expectancy, which is another crucial point. In the favela in Rocinha that I will show you in a moment, we got people that the life expectancy for people is 20 years shorter than the average of Brazil, just to give you an idea of what we are talking about. Most of these, when you look at the total numbers, because Asia is very, very populated, of course, are found in Eastern and Southeastern Asia, as you see here with some numbers. Africa, of course, is another big point, and we expect a lot of increase of population in middle size, especially cities across Africa, and that's the point. People flocking to cities again and finding some informal settlements to stay around cities because cities offer jobs. And that's the hard truth. And 90%, that's why it's relevant, 90% of urban growth is forecasted to happen in Asia and Africa in the next 30 years. So this is something that is crucial for the future of mankind, I would say. 3 billion people, just to give you an idea of the market, of an untapped market, will require adequate and affordable housing by 2030. These are the numbers. And you could say, I mean, that informal is the new normal. In big parts of the world, this is the reality that many, many people are facing. Then with incredible inequalities, this is a very famous picture showing affluent people on the right and people living in a favela, in an informal settlement on the left. But the question is that these kind of settlements are not disappearing magically. And it's not like raising these settlements, which very often have very strong social bonds between the people, that are going to solve the problem. And the problem is how we improve the situation in these informal settlements, improve them, make them better through time, making them evolve. But for sure, what is not going to happen is that someone goes there, bulldozes these informal settlements and start from scratch with nice and tidy and clean new buildings. Not everywhere, anyway. So what can be done? We got to think about localized interventions. Medellin in Colombia has been very successful at that. So, for example, providing quick access from higher levels on the hills to the formal city down at the bottom of the valley of Medellin with, for example, this system of escalators, sometimes with cable cars. And that really opened up a lot of opportunities for the communities living up in the hills, for example. So in the last, 10 minutes or so, I'm going very fast. I know I'm bombarding you with information, but that's the point. And then maybe we time to go back a little bit with more detail on some of the aspects if you're interested. This project that I co-chair with my colleague, Professor Massimo Tadi, of my same department, was one of the projects that were awarded the Polysocial Award. Polysocial, I don't know if you're aware of that, but it's the social responsibility program of Politecnico di Milano. So it's supporting initiatives, education and research initiatives to support development across the world. So the idea here was essentially so it was also mentioned, this project that finished a couple of years ago. It was also mentioned in one of the publications of UN Habitat about health, improving health conditions in informal settlements. It was applied to, as anticipated earlier, to a favela, and one of probably the biggest favela in South America. It's located in the south part of Rio de Janeiro. What you don't see here because there's fog is the ocean. So the location is amazing indeed. It's typically one of those contrasting situations I was mentioning. You have the São Conrado neighborhood, those tall blocks of flats, which are one of the most affluent communities in Rio de Janeiro. And then just behind you have this sprawling favela, which is an incredible place. It's made, as you see here, of these informal but not shacks, okay, kind of buildings. They are not, tents. They are not made of poor materials. They're built in concrete and bricks, after all. And they do have windows, and they do have finishings inside. So the interesting thing about these settlements is that it's not black or white. You're not out in a shack or living in a very good apartment. You also have these intermediate situations which make them a sort of quasi-permanent form of settlement. And this is the amazing part that I think you don't realize unless you start working on this kind of settlements. You see also there are buildings that are more than 4 or 5 stories high. So it's not this kind of impromptu development. This has been around for like 60, 70 years, just to give you an idea. So it's an incredibly dense situation, of course. The estimation is between 150 to 200,000 inhabitants. The average income is not that low. It's low, but not super low. Location, it's close to Ipanema and Copacabana. It's an incredible location. But the challenges is more or less what you understand are the main challenges in general for cities. You got density, you got treatment of waste, you got water management, you got all these kind of problems that we try to analyze and provide solutions in a way that we'll show you in a moment. So we got this multidisciplinary group with Politecnico and a lot of other companies or administrations and associations. And we put together a team of different departments of Politecnico, including the energy department. And we worked on, let's say, starting from the technical aspects, and we assumed that these technical aspects would be ways to then also improve the social conditions of these people. So I'm not going into the IMM methodology that you saw mentioned in the title of the research project. I'd just like to mention that this methodology allowed us, by looking at the structure of the city and the components of the structure of the city, we modeled the favela. You see this very nice 3D model. We looked at how it's built, or the constituents of the urban settlement. We identified some categories, but again, in a nutshell, we identified that interface, so the connection between different functions, was the weakest category that we found in the favela. And then we started hypothesizing that improving the connection between the different parts of the favela was really key to improving the global environmental behavior of the favela itself. So thanks to an NGO working in the favela itself, we finally identified 6 areas. And these areas became somehow the hubs where we started to imagine to apply some of the solutions that I will show you in a moment. So these really become concentrated hubs where we start to apply improvement strategies, and then looking at the ripple effects that these strategies, localized strategies, can have on the wider system of the favela. That's the methodology part, let's say, that we try to apply. So we looked, thanks to the multidisciplinary team that I was mentioning, to a number of dimensions: energy, waste, water, ecosystem services, food mobility, construction, ICT. To go back again a little bit to the aspect of data and Internet of Things and ICT, again, we also had 2 aspects, let's say, here. So first of all, the knowledge of the situation of these informal settlements, which now really transformative technologies, which are based on, again, cell phones, mobile data. All these guys living in the favela, they do have cell phones, they do have internet connections, they're not disconnected from the world. So you can collect and transmit a lot of data and information through portable devices. And this is an important way also to engage the community, to correlate all these aspects together in a urban management system, and then also to engage people in telling how things are happening. So there are, as we said, lots of problems. If you have to ask me what is the main one, it's probably water treatment and sanitation. That's the thing that the inhabitants ask more, because it's the weakest point here. You see what happens when it rains. The rain just goes, the ground is completely sealed. And this is typical. I mean, people sometimes die just because they are taken away by the water flow. The favela, as you saw, is not flat. It's on a steep hill. And sometimes people, I mean, it's terrible to say, but they really disappear into the sewer system sometimes. So it's incredibly tough situation. So this is one of the big aspects, is water. So again, sewage system, which is very partial. You got open air channels collecting the water. What is needed very strongly and badly is solutions for the treatment of wastewater in terms of channels and pipes, but also you might have heard, for example, from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, ideas of toilets that don't use water, for example, which is another interesting aspect of looking at the problem. So here you see, I'm not reading all of them, but critical issues and solutions for each of the areas. And I think these can be inspirational in thinking about possible innovative solutions that can be used in this kind of informal settlements. So rainwater, providing clean water, which is the other big aspect. Water is comes to the top of the favela is not very constant in the supply. So there's a big problem here. They collect it into tanks, but then in the tanks you have biological and bacterial growth. So these are big aspects, of course. Waste management in terms of collection, in terms of reusing locally the materials. There are solutions which are very interesting. For example, about the reuse of plastic and the transformation of plastic, which is the big problem here. Because plastic bottles and plastic containers, they clog the open air channels, you know, and then the water cannot flow properly, and then it goes out on the streets. I mean, it's all connected. That's the point. You see that everything is connected to different cause-effect relationships, which are very complex. We also identified the possibility of biodigester plants, which should produce fertilizer starting from organic waste. And this fertilizer could be used also for local food production, which was starting in some parts of the favela, with maybe some technology for dense places like aquaponics or hydroponics, which need fertilizer. And then you can start thinking about circular economy solutions at a very small scale, and with very strong involvement of the community. So we did some calculations also about that. Energy, the situation is also very poor because they do have contracts. They do have a supply, a formal supply of energy. But as I was saying earlier, it's not black and white. So you do have part of the energy that comes here is formal. Part of that is also a little bit stolen, you know. And anyway, very often the electricity simply goes away. So there's a topic here of trying to use renewables as a way to, well, somehow ensure a supply of energy that is not as inconstant as it is now. And so using the roofs, there are plenty of them, for PV panels, community PV panels, which are being also deployed. And there are companies that do that in these informal communities across Brazil, for example. And then mobility, which is another aspect, because the favela is incredibly steep. It's more than 200, also 300 meters from bottom to top. So that means that many of the people you see on the left go with motorbikes. And there's, again, this informal transport system made with motorbikes. I've been there. I mean, it's an experience that goes beyond what you can imagine. This is a rich favela in a way. I mean, they do have a subway system at the bottom of the favela. They have a station connecting to the center of Rio de Janeiro. But the last part, the last mile, is the most crucial part. So we also try to identify possibilities with e-bikes, looking at the slopes of roads and understanding where this could be done. And then this was applied to some transformation areas. This was a project that involved also students with some final thesis projects. So I'm not going in the detail of that, also because I'm finishing my time. But we really, as I said earlier, identified these transformation areas as the areas where we could apply parts, a set of solutions among the catalog in a way that we identified. Okay, and then we looked finally at the transformation, of how this transformation actually improved and how much the system, the environmental performances of the system, global system, so before and after also. The idea is kind of, you know, homeopathic transformation, right? You start from one in localized areas, and you see how these, because cities are complex systems where everything is interconnected, and localized transformation can have wider effect, and that's an important point. But it's not the point of what we're talking about today. So that's more or less it. Let me finish with Italo Calvino, again, a great Italian writer. If you're interested about cities, you've got to read his Invisible Cities book, with his message of hope and optimism about cities that always, even in the most difficult context, always have a happy place. So thanks for your attention, and I'm open to questions. And if you want to go deeper in some of the aspects that I very, very briefly touched upon, I would be glad to do it.
Thank you very much, Prof. Masera, for sharing with us your expertise. And I think your eye-opening point of view for things that we take for granted in our cities. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we can start with the first question from Ayush. In your opinion, how significant it will be to involve local community in startups providing solutions for informal settlements?
Totally crucial. Thanks, Ayush, for the question. It's totally crucial because, well, first of all, I will tell you, okay, I have the experience. Now we're starting other projects in other parts, some in Africa, for example. So we see what happens there. But what I can tell you about the situation in South America and in Rio de Janeiro in particular is that the community bonds there are extremely strong. It's also something that I guess we underestimate. Our understanding of informal settlements is very, very superficial, of course, because it's not our experience as people from industrialized countries or European countries, because Brazil is an industrialized country after all, so you cannot say that Brazil is not industrialized. But people stay, if you ask people in the favela, they want to stay in the favela. I mean, they want that their community improves. They don't want to leave. They have social relationships there, and they're happy with that. They are close to their jobs, and that's a super important aspect. They can go and they don't have to spend like 2 hours on a bus, on an overcrowded bus, to go to their job in the city center, and 2 hours in the evening to go back to their home. So if you are able to activate the interest and the engagement of the local community in these situations, this is something that can really activate some local economies, microeconomies. So it's really the opportunity of activating local small companies. Think about the possibility of local companies, for example, installing PV panels and doing that and acquiring expertise to do that. Or doing some buildings, for example, building works with special materials that improve, for example, the resistance, the durability of houses. And again, going around and proposing those skills to other people. So on one hand, I would say it's crucial because they want to be involved, and these are places with strong relationships between people. And so if you want to do something there, you have to be accepted. And that's the other aspect. What we learned is that the presence of the NGO in our research team was super important because we couldn't have even imagined to do something if we didn't know the situation, of course, and if we didn't have a sort of pre-approval of the local community. I mean, you can imagine. I mean, we're talking about a community in this case, which is 150,000 people. So it's a medium-sized Italian city. And I mean, in an Italian city like that, I don't know, Brescia or something like that, you have everything. You have rich people, you have poor people, you have good guys, you have bad guys. Do you have people dealing with drugs? Yes, of course. You also have that kind of people. So it's not, I mean, as I said, black or white. And the assumption that in the informal settlement, everyone is the same. So these communities are incredibly rich, and they have the potential to really activate microeconomies. So in a nutshell, yes, we got to take these people on board. And if you want to be successful, of course, you got to be very aware of the situation and limitations and so on. On the other hand, in these kind of communities, there is a bit of spending capacity. So again, what I was also pointing out before, it's not that we are talking about deprived situations where you have to go there and build or provide solutions as a gift, as a gift of international cooperation, for example. It's people that can afford to buy some things, that can afford to build homes on time, incrementally, but they can afford to pay electricity bills in part. So it's, as I was saying, it's an amazing where to discover, to be, of course, very humble and enter there without preconceptions and being open to listening and understanding what the community is like, and not, of course, patronizing and say, hey, I'm coming, and, you know, the big guy, I got plenty of technology, I can solve all of your problems, and so on. The cable car solution, for example, that worked very well in Medellin, in Colombia, was a total failure in a favela in Rio de Janeiro, where they started shooting, you know, to the cable car as the cabins passed by, and they had to close it. So it's really different. And if you go there and you think that every, you know, a solution can fit every different condition, that's a very bad point to start with.
Okay. Well, I think there is no other question. So again, thanks for your great presentation. And well, I let the word to Lorenzo, if you want to conclude this event. Thanks again to everyone.
Yeah. Thank you very much to all the speakers that have been with us today. Thank you to Professor Grimaccia, and thank you to Simona Cornero, and thank you to Gabriele Masera for their very interesting presentation. This session is over. I hope you found it inspiring as we did, and I think it's time to say good night to everybody.
Thank you, Lorenzo, and thanks to all the distinguished speakers today. It was a pleasure to host you on our platform. I hope to see you soon for the next briefing webinar, which will be held the 10th, if I'm not wrong. Lorenzo, correct me?
Right.
Okay, great. So thanks again to the guest, and I wish you a happy night.
Thank you, and good luck to all the students participating, or the people participating in the challenge.